Hello, everyone. I am Alper Markov, and this is Concepts and Legends. And today's interview is with MTG artist Titus Lunter. So let's not wait and get to the interview. So, thank you very much for taking the time to do this today. And I don't think that people realize this, but it's kind of hard to play Magic without using one of your cards. You are sort of the landman.
I mean, there's a rich history to choose from for them. So, you know, luckily there's always a good bit of diversity in the game. But yeah, no, I've done a lot of lands.
Yeah. So I read that you said that you were did 3 years of actually trying to get into the game and being rejected. But it sounded like when I read it that the letter that you posted was more of a maybe and rather than just a flat out no. Do you think that they would say to people no if like somebody like me applied and I draw like a stick figure and said, "Here's my submission"?
Well, I mean, for a very long time, it wasn't a yes or a no, right? I mean, they get so many applications every single day, so most of them don't get a reply because simply there's not enough people to handle all the amount of artwork that they get in. So I think for me, I guess I just got lucky. I wasn't really under the impression that I would hear something really quick, because even when I tried to get into Magic back in the day, I knew that a lot of people had tried for years to get into, because back then the artist pool was a lot smaller as well. There was a lot less product, so the team was a lot smaller. So things worked a little bit differently than they do now.
What do you think it is about landscapes that draws you to them?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I started off with landscapes because they were easier to draw than characters. That's my the default answer, right? Because learning anatomy was kind of difficult for me. And then later I realized that it's actually there's more to landscapes than what people give them credit for. They usually kind of they're a little bit underappreciated in the art community because people think there's not a lot to say with them. That's been the trend for the last couple hundred years. That's not something that's recent or anything. But I realized actually, conveying emotions with characters, you have the facial expression and whatnot. But trying to convey similar emotions with landscapes is actually a pretty fun challenge. So it started off because it was easy, but then it kind of became this thing where I tried to get as much out of landscapes as I could.
And it seems like you hit the ground running as far as being connected with lands. I mean, you had the Frontier Bouviac, and then you kind of slammed into doing all of the, you got the assignment to do all of the Zendikar expeditions, or a good majority of them. Was that something that shocked you when you got that you took off so quickly?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it was being in the right place at the right time. I was doing lots of hyper realistic landscape stuff for video games, which was my primary job at the time. So I knew that once I got the request in to do some stuff for cons, it was like, oh yeah, we like the realism stuff. But I didn't expect it to stick, especially when I got more into the game, because I played before I got into the game as an illustrator, and I knew that the community was a really big fan of old school lands, old school John Avon stuff, and a little bit more fantasy vibe to it, right? And here I come in with a much more harsher, much more realistic take on things, and I wasn't quite sure how it was going to land. So getting a bunch of cards right after that was a little bit of a surprise, but a welcome one.
Do you still, I read that once you finish the first sketch, when you get the ideas out, that is essentially going to be what the painting is going to be. Is that something you still utilize?
Yeah. I mean, there's always room. I mean, what I show to the client and what I do is obviously two different things, right? I mean, I usually make a whole bunch of sketches, all different kinds of variations before I settle on an idea that I then send to the client. You always try to go, or at least I try to go beyond the brief a little bit. They ask for one thing, and you try to figure out, okay, what does that mean to me? And then, so by the time that you get to the sketch phase, you're a little bit more married to it than you'd normally be. And one of the downsides of being in this industry is that you have to kill your darlings quite often. You know, you'll be very invested in a sketch, and then the art director has a different view, and then, you know, you have to toss everything out and start over. But yeah, no, I'm still pretty much firm in that camp of what I do, what I sketch out is like how I want it to be, and then take it to finish.
Was there ever a sketch that got killed that eventually became something that you loved even more?
Like it got a revision or an idea change, and then
Yeah.
um oh, that's a tough question. I mean, most of the art directors there are very good at figuring out what a card needs. So I think the one that I went back and forth on the most was the mountain from uh the Return to Ravnica. um I'm not quite sure, but it's the mountain where, you know, it's a top down view with the angels coming in and all that stuff. And I worked
Yes.
a whole bunch in that card. And I had a hard time with the art director at the time and with his feedback, because I just couldn't quite see, you know, how it would all come together. So I acted I acted a bit foolishly there, but ultimately we worked out the communication, and he explained to me what he wanted out of the card, and I was like, oh yeah, actually that could be really cool. And I think it's a really really cool mountain now. The point of view is just ridiculous, and there's a lot happening. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that came out.
You primarily worked in digital, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
When did you, I mean, had you done any sort of oil before, and what was what was it like doing a oil piece like for a client like Wizards or anything like that? Was it more pressure?
I mean, I didn't come from a traditional art school background, so I'm not trained in using oils at all. So I haven't really done many oil paintings, and the few that I have tried, mostly now for the latest set, Kaldheim, um, we're very challenging. It's a completely different medium. It acts differently. Your expression is differently. So that means just how your brush hits the canvas, and how you load the paint and all that kind of stuff. On the one hand, it's very very cool to do because you get a different kind of interaction with the piece, because of the texture of the surface and the texture of the paint and all that kind of stuff. So there is a lot of fun stuff to get out of it, but because I'm so experienced, it's also extremely frustrating, because things that I normally take for granted now take absolutely forever to do right and to get right. And so yeah, ups and downs.
Um, like I have to side comment. Like I listened to a few other interviews with you, and I think you had been spending a lot of more time in the States, because I was thinking to myself, he doesn't have an accent, but I'm hearing the accent now, and I'm wondering how long have you been? Where are you now? Right now?
I'm in the Netherlands.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I was thinking you must have been chilling in the Netherlands for a while now, because you got the accent going.
Well, I am Dutch, so any accent would be from my American teachers and American TV and stuff, as I was, growing up. But my primary education for a couple of years, the Game Design Academy was all in English, and the most people that you get to know are English. So I think over the course of the last 15 years, I've probably spoken English more than I have Dutch, even though I live here.
Do you know what the first oil piece was that you did for Magic?
Um, well, I haven't had any of them approved. Right, that's still a bit of a bit of a struggle, mostly because I want that hyper real stuff that I do digitally, and translating that into oils is really hard. But the first study that I did, where I figured out which colors I was going to use in oils first before I moved digital, was the Ixalan Island. Made a very small one, and I was very proud of that. I really liked that. And then the first oil that got closest to being approved, where they were like, minor tweaking, and then as I was tweaking it digitally, I kind of went overboard. It was the sulfurous mire now from Kaldheim. But most of the time I get really really complicated architecture pieces and stuff like that, and oil painting that would take me absolutely forever. And then you'd have to figure out, okay, now I have to buy my own time back in order to teach myself oil painting. But if you keep getting booked with cool gigs, then there's only so much hours in the day, and I don't want to spend every waking minute painting. Right, there's more to life than just painting.
Do you like it's pretty astonishing that like for instance with Modern Horizons, and then you with Amonkhet, and especially with the jump starts, there are all these lands that like in some of the sets you do with the entire lands, like all the basic lands are yours. Do you then do you get the assignments for that, or have you ever asked for anything like that? Have you ever asked for a specific assignment?
I've asked for mostly to not get basic lands, and then still getting basic lands. I think now finally I'm not getting basic lands anymore, because as much fun as they are to do, I also want to do other stuff, right? See what else is out there. There have been cases where I was like, yes, I would really love to do that. I mean, the ADs knew for a long time I would love to do Snowlands if we ever went back there. And then the pressure became so big on doing the Snowlands because there were the full art ones that I got stuck in my own head so much. So I'm not really super happy with how they came out, but you know, it is what it is. And the only other card that I asked for was Ensnaring Bridge, because at the time I was talking to that art director, and there were a couple versions of Ensnaring Bridge out, and I was like, well, you know what? For me, none of these really hit the mood of Ensnaring Bridge as well as the original Stronghold one. Like I can see what the artists are going for, and it's very cool, but I don't think you've quite nailed what that piece could be, right? And I didn't know at the time that they were working on the Masters 25, and I was in the States at the time. So the very next morning, the art director came into the little office where I was working, and he was like, well, there comes a time in everyone's life where you have to put your money where your mouth is. What are you talking about? And he put the brief in front of me. He's like, you need to do the remake of Ensnaring Bridge, but then Stronghold version, but reimagined. So I was like, yeah, okay, that could come back and bite me if I don't do this really well. So,
But it came out fantastic. I mean, it's a creepy card.
it was a creepy card. I just love the mechanic of the card so much. I think it's such a elegant design. You know, taking into account hand size and stuff. I thought that was really funny. So immediately I thought I need to have different sizes of hands in the bridge. You know, for the different hand sizes, literally. Right? It's a stupid joke, but I still stand by it. I think it's funny.
No, I mean, I get very much, I get like the feelings of like HR Geiger, the face hugger.
Yeah.
It's got that feeling. It's got the sinister fingers, and you know, anything that brings that to mind is just, it's horrific, and you just see the guy stopping mid step. It's great. I mean, I think it's the best one. Period.
I think it's my least successful print sales one ever, because even though it's very popular in the card and the card art, yeah, I think maybe it's a bit too creepy because people just don't want to hang it on their walls, which is fair enough.
I mean, yeah, well, I mean, I do, but usually my apartment's got, you know, I've got horror movie posters and Hannibal posters and all that stuff. So it's
Nice.
but so is I wonder, is Mudhole gonna be a thing? Is that really gonna happen? I know it was the April Fool's joke.
Yeah, I mean, I have the artist proofs. I'm not sure if the actual secret lair for it has come out yet, or if it's shipped yet. If it's not, it'd be kind of funny.
I don't think that they have, like, I think from what I understand, they said that they were going to announce it, but it was a joke at first, but I don't think that it's been, I mean, I think it was supposed to just be an April Fool's joke.
Well, in my understanding, it was going to get printed, but then there was controversy around one of the artists that was in there, and the whole thing kind of got sidetracked. Excuse me. So I'm not actually entirely sure what has happened, but I have Mudhole artist proofs, which are kind of cool. So the card, at least in 30 copies of it, exists. There exists cool. 30 copies of Mudhole because I have them like right near me.
Another one that I loved, and I actually voted this as one of the top 10 of the best arts. I think I actually gave it number 1 of the best art of 2020 in a little video I did. But the swamp from Jumpstart with the Phyrexian Obliterator in the background, that's fantastic. What was that? Because I know that you love the Phyrexians.
Oh yeah.
And so was that part of the design that came in the card, or was that something that you were allowed to incorporate?
No, the swamp was always going to be a Phyrexian swamp. I had no idea at the time that they were going to plan the Phyrexian language uh, on there. So it came in as any other swamp, but then the theme or the location was Phyrexia, and the brief was very simple. It was um, basically just an oil sea, a slick oil sea with a menacing creature in it, right? And how I approached that was up to me. Uh, so I mean, I had to put the obliterator in there because I have such a deep love for that card and for the design. And then I thought it'd be cool to have the Vault of Whispers in the background as well. You know, two one card that's banned and one card that's kind of hated. Yeah, I think it was a cool mix. And normally I'm not much of a central composition kind of guy. I mean, I do it sometimes because it pulls so much focus towards a singular point, and with a landscape, it's much more about setting the scene. So with landscapes, it's usually more useful to paint a scene where people have the feeling, at least, that they can look around, right, and go like, oh, and etc. And here I was like, I want there to be a singular focus, and I want people to really feel the air, the you know, the smell of it all, and the menacing nature that you come out of these metallic reeds, and there's this obliterator, and there's nothing. I mean, there's nowhere for you to hide. It's just you, the infinite oil slick sea, and that obliterator right there, and that's it. And, yeah, I think it came out. I think it came out pretty well.
It's got this like sort of, for me, it's got this like air of desperation and loneliness too, because it I sort of, as a viewer, I took it as like, this is just maybe just everything there is dead basically, and
Mm.
this obliterator's like kind of just stomping around looking for things to obliterate. There's not really anything to obliterate. It's almost like a sad thing to be a, well, not, I mean, not almost, it's a sad thing to be a Phyrexian, because you're just a parasite that takes over. And but what happens when you take over?
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the fun things and one of the scary things when you get a card like that is you immediately know how much Phyrexians live in the community, and everybody has their own idea. Same for Ensnaring Bridge, or when you get to do any kind of remake, people have their own idea of what it is, and I think understanding that nostalgia is a very important part of it. Luckily, in this case, I could tap in that nostalgia because at that time I'd been playing Magic for 10 years, 12 years, something like that. So it was 10 or 12 years of deep love for Phyrexians and understanding what they meant to me. So I finally, got to share that. Whereas with some of the other remakes, it's with cards or planes or characters that I'm a little less familiar with, and I have to figure out like, okay, what does it mean to the people? What can I take away from that? How can I be respectful to that while adding something new? And with this Phyrexian, yeah, there is a sort of sad and loneliness about the power of the obliterator and your confrontation when it hits the board, right? So a part of it was, how do you feel when an obliterator would hit the board? Like on a naked board, you'd put that thing down, and that's kind of like what I try to capture with that piece.
Interesting. That's interesting. So, I mean, and there is a theme of that also too going on, I think, with a lot of the call time cards. I love the Faceless Haven. It's super haunting. It's
Mm.
I'm not sure the story of that one yet. I try to pick out the lore, but it's difficult to find. What was the art direction for that one?
Um, well, I struggled a lot with that card because from a technical point of view, just an illustration technical point of view, it doesn't look complicated, but it's really annoyingly complicated. I had a real hard time with painting a cave, and I'm not even sure if I knew it was a manland uh, at the time. But yeah, the brief was like, oh, we want you to paint a cave entrance, and it has to have this very specific kind of mask on top of it, and that was about it. So I had to figure out in the style guide, I'm like, okay, where is this? What was that mask for? Shape shifting? Okay, that kind of stuff. Yeah, cool. And I wanted it to be a little bit spooky. I know Caldan was a lot about rich colors and all that kind of stuff, but I wanted this to be a little spooky. So I kept it as, again, with the swamp, I kept trying to keep it as simple as I possibly could to really focus you and draw you into that cave. was one of those things again where I wrestled with it for such a long time, trying to get it right, because painting a cave entrance is quite difficult,
Right. Yeah.
weirdly enough for me, um, to make it look interesting, right? But yeah, I mean, we got there in the end. And when I figured out, it was a manland, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool, because I had a similar struggle with lumbering falls, but that came out pretty okay too.
Yeah, no, it's got the vibe of like there's a myth in the North America for the Native Americans called the Wendigo,
Oh
and
yeah.
it very much has that Wendigo feel.
Mm.
That it's, and I mean they utilized a lot in the show Hannibal, and I was like, wow, this seems to be tapping into the Wendigo vibe, which is, I mean, it's something that exists in snow, and I thought like that was my interpretation of it. I was like, I don't know if there is a Wendigo in there, but I feel like there is.
Yeah, I mean that's the important part of most artwork, that it allows at least a little bit of room for interpretation and people to project their own stories, because ultimately, what is outside of the artist's control is um, the reference point that the viewer has. Right? If you've seen X movie, then you will try to project that on as many things as you see, because that's then how you're wired, right? So if you've seen The Walking Dead as your last show, you binge it for a week and you see something, you're more likely to say, oh, that reminds me of this from The Walking Dead, right? So one of the things that you'll always try to do, or that I always try to do with my landscapes, is be as uh, figurative as I can be with the important bits, and then all the bits that aren't as important leave open to the interpretation. So people have their own relationship to snow and to caves, I guess, and to weird masks. So there's a little wiggle room there.
Yeah, you did that too with one of the pieces I was looking up. I think it was called "You Know Its Name," and I think it's referencing Godzilla.
Yeah, oh, this is an old one on my art station. The gray one with the debris.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was a God. Oh, I love Godzilla. I love those kind of monster movie kind of thing. But I think it's cool because even though you don't say what it is, and you don't show it, people know what you're referencing to, because I mean that's how pop culture kind of works.
Right. You see a decimated Japanese city, like it's sort of like, but like there's really kind of like there's like a few options there, and one of them is
Yeah,
gotta be Godzilla.
yeah. I think that kind of stuff is just a lot of fun.
You had said that with your with the creation of Wrath of God that there was not a lot of direction for it. There was just basically they said we want to see a bunch of zombies getting killed like in mass. Um,
Yeah,
how did that translate into what you did? Because what you did is almost, I mean, to me, it's got a Joseph Campbell like the mythology kind of thing going to it. I've had a dream, and this was before I even played Magic, that I saw something very similar to that happen in my dream that was happening in Wrath of God, and it's always haunted me because it's so strikingly similar. What what kind of how did you do that? Where did it come from? I mean, it's a fascinating thing that's happening in that painting.
yeah. It was one of those things again where the brief comes in, you go like, wait, did I read that right? Does that say Wrath of God? Because it's a pretty, iconic um, iconic card, and it was even more weird because this was the moment right before impact. And yeah, the brief was fairly simple. It said it's Oketra's arrow coming down and destroying a bunch of zombies. But there's a million ways of doing that, and I think one of the things that popped into my head first was like, okay, if I need to show an army of zombies, and by the way, thanks for putting that in the brief, because I'm going to take me forever to paint that. I need to show the best way I can of what an army is. How can I get as many in there? And I love scenes from movies like World War Z where they stack up on the walls really really high and they kind of climb over each other just to get there. And in my mind, the zombies were very very similar. They're very primal in the way that they react to their surroundings to me. So I figured that, oh yeah, if they would see a very bright light coming in, they would kind of reach for it,
Mm.
which would be this really kind of cool symbolic thing, because in my head, Oketra's arrow wouldn't shoot up and then come down just really, really fast. in my mind it would go up, and then as it would come down really fast, and right before it touches it would slow down like really hard till it
Ah,
almost comes to a standstill. So the point which I tried to show is the arrow coming to a standstill and these zombies climbing over each other to try and touch this shiny thing which they don't know what it is, causing their own destruction. Right, the destruction was inevitable and it's going to be total. So I needed a foreground where I could show some zombies standing around in their natural element, and then the rest I wanted this fluid motion, this almost wave, where a group of zombies becomes a liquid in how it behaves, amassing towards this light, and then obviously the fraction of a second right before they touch it and they're all get
they
obliterated.
they would do that too. Now that you mention it, I mean, zombies are of a hive mind, and they're not sophisticated. If they see a light, they're going to do what early man did with fire before it burned itself.
Yeah, you go. I figured they would go towards it and kind of, yeah, try to touch it. I mean, it all happens quite fast, but I was really interested in having that juxtaposition of the motion of the arrow stopping, and then the motion of the zombies taking over, causing their own demise in a way, because they do cause their own demise because they're zombies and they're evil, and Oketra couldn't stand for it, right? So that, but showing that was just a fun challenge, and that's what I try to do by like going beyond the brief, right? Not every card allows for that. I mean, a lot of briefs don't. I mean, sometimes an orb is just an orb, right? And there's not a lot more to it. But especially with signature cards like Wrath of God and Ensnaring Bridge, the big ones, you try to go that extra mile.
Is there another card that I mean, because I love to hear these stories. Is there any other cards that you did that kind of narrative that you can talk about, because it's fascinating to me?
Well, I have to pull up my my folder with my finals here. Hopefully that's not too loud for the stream. Because by now I've done
Was
quite a
140 something?
bunch. Yeah, something like that. So they're not all fresh in my memory.
Which is
anymore.
fantastic, because I read that one of your early experiences, you were at some sort of convention and people were apparently complaining that you hadn't done enough cards, and I
Yeah.
thought to myself, well, who's laughing now?
I mean, I don't exactly, but yeah, it was my first GP in Seville in Spain. I don't blame him, because it was a small group of artists. I got very fortunate because I got to meet a bunch of artists there, like Clint Searly, who showed me the ropes and lent me his Sharpies and stuff, because I was woefully unprepared. And it's funny because in recent years, Spain has actually become my most frequented country for GPs and invites for tournaments and stuff. I love going there. They're super chill people. And in terms of cards with a little bit more of a backstory, I think Castle Lochthwain was a big one for me.
It's a gorgeous card. It's very gorgeous. What's the story behind that one?
Well, I got to do the Eldraine push, the concept push, and coming up with a bunch of stuff. And I think it was one of the last Magic pushes that I got to do. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult now, not only because of my visa status, but also because of COVID, obviously. But Castle Lochthwain holds a special place because I had this idea for the fortress, and they were like, well, we want the fortress to kind of be flying. So I came up with this, and it's funny because the town I live in now used to be a bastion fort. So a bastion fort is the fort. If you look on top, it has roughly the shape of a star, and it has these big angular walls and the moat around it, and everything shaped in a star. It's really, really cool. So if you haven't looked at bastion forts or bastion settlements, definitely worth a Google. So I thought, yeah, that'd be cool. I'll have that, a big bastion thing, and have it floating and make it all creepy like. My original concept was quite Star Destroyer-y. I mean, people still compare it to it, which is kind of funny, either to a genie bottle, which is like, okay, I suppose you could see that. See, in my mind, I see the whole thing as a 3D thing as I made it, so it's a little less of a genie bottle, much more of a Star Destroyer. I don't know if you could see it, but if I pointed my camera down, there's a really big Star Destroyer. Like,
If yeah, I'll be able to post actual images of what we're talking about in post. So anything that you're talking about will come up on screen.
Nice. So obviously the design changed a little bit. It got a bit more fantasy-esque in line with Eldraine, but that was one of the things where at that time I was already asking for a little less lands. I've done a whole bunch of lands after that, but kind of like phasing it out. But I was like, I really, really would like to do Lochthwain because this is a really weird place. The original had this big drawbridge coming out the back and just dragging across the land, as a giant middle finger to all the peasants living below. Like, oh, we need to open the door because we have a party, so let's just open the big drawbridge. And if we just happen to fly over a farm at the time, oh well, and capturing that I thought would be just so cool to try and do. There's all these things about, good guys move left or right in frame in regular cinema. So I was going to do, the other way around, have the lighting commands, show the party banners, this ominous cloud. So there was just a whole lot of love that I had for that location because I got to do it start to finish, right? And I was there when it was born. Me and the team had a lot of back and forth on how it should look, and I made the initial concept designs. And then their in-house artist took it like one step further, and then I could, put the finishing touches on it. So it was a really nice from inception to finich on.
Is that true? And good guys move from left to right in movies? Is that something they utilize?
I mean, that's not like a hard rule, but it's usually kind of the tropey kind of rule. If you want to show a bad guy, you have them come in from the right and then move to the left, because it's in Western civilization we read left to right, so that's kind of like how we go. Obviously, if you take it from a different culture's point of view, for the Japanese, or they read right to left, so that doesn't go anymore. But for where I came from, yeah, there was quite a lot of that.
That's an interesting. Is that something that you figured out on your own, or was that something that was pointed out to you by someone else?
Well, my wife studied film school. She's also a magic artist, but she studied film school, so she always comes up with a lot of useful tips.
That's insightful stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do think that I found very admirable about you is that you do talk very openly in your blogs and in interviews about some of the like more difficult experiences you've had with being a painter, and some of the community experiences and mental health and all that good stuff. And I find it very, very brave of you. And I'm wondering, it seems like now you've become much more balanced about who you are as an artist. What would be the advice that you would give yourself starting out now that you would give it from your point of view today?
Oh man, I appreciate you saying balanced out, but being an artist is always difficult for a myriad of reasons, right? Mostly we make our own life miserable because you shouldn't compare your work, but then you do, and then you have your own targets of stuff that you want to do. So it's always just a big kind of jumble, right, going on. But staying true to yourself is one of the best pieces of advice, and understanding that being true to yourself means that you keep changing over time, right? You're not a monolith. You do evolve and take stuff on board, and being able to take that feedback and also be able to take a stance where you go like, no, this is what I like to do, so I'm just going to do that, and I don't care if it's the same thing over and over again, because that form of artistic expression that comes from that happy place of being able to do what you love and also being able to take feedback on board that allows you to grow is way more rare than people think. It's very easy to make commissions when somebody asks you paint this and you have the technical skill to paint it. You can just do it. It's just making stuff. But allowing yourself to interpret that and slightly change it to how it best fits you, that is very, very difficult. Because it takes courage. You have to be able to stand up to your AD or whatever and say, this is what I genuinely believe in. And also allow for that to grow. I think that's a very underestimated kind of quality, usually because so much stuff that people associate with artists, like, anxiety or depression. I'm not talking about the starving artist, because that's just really ridiculous. But art and any form of self-expression where you put yourself out there is just intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
I think content creators to a large degree understand, like, will my audience like this? Do I need to change myself in order to be liked? Well, for art, it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same thing. So staying true to that is really difficult, but ultimately worth it.
Yeah, I was talking to Magali about it, and also if it makes you feel any better, I still can't believe that I heard this, but John Avon told me that he doesn't understand why people are fans of his work. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was a hard one to answer. But I was like,
Yeah.
well, but
Yeah.
I'm talking to her about it. I think that especially for you visual artists, because you're not going after the spotlight, you are more behind the scenes by nature, that when it does put you front and center, there is almost like more of a vulnerability to it than if you were just looking to be, say, an actor or a musician, where being on stage is part of your job.
Yeah, it's also for one of the most difficult things is that most painters that I know, I mean, you have production painters, you have fine art painters, you have everybody who's stuck in the middle, and I'm one of those, where you put so much of your own of yourself into each painting, but they're attached to a brand, right? And the question always becomes, if you take that brand away, what is left? As in, how much of the painting's popularity or appeal is simply due to the fact that it is for a popular brand? And that is a very, very troublesome question, which can often lead to statements like, I'm not sure why people like my work. And I have a very similar thing. Like, for some pieces, I don't know why people like them, because it's always the opposite happens. When you don't like a piece, the audience does. And when you like a piece, the audience doesn't, or they're not as engaged with it. So that bit of vulnerability will always remain. And it's always just a giant pain in the butt trying to get over that, because it affects you so much. Because it doesn't matter if you're introverted or extroverted, or you can take feedback or you can't take feedback. The second that you put your work out there, it doesn't matter how many good comments you get. If you get one negative comment, it sticks. And that's true for actors, musicians, the content creators that I know, and artists as well. You try to let it go, but I think it's a big signifier that it's very, very hard to disconnect the brand and the audience from the artwork, right? And you feel that.
Yeah, and that's a question that not that you wouldn't even know to ask if you weren't doing it. And for me, it's almost like it's a sad thing to hear that even has to be a question, because I do not believe that any of these pieces would be of any less worth because they aren't going to be connected with a specific game. I love them because I love the pieces of art, and it also is sort of a question that would be I mean, you can't really answer it because the cards already do exist with the property, and so and there is a certain pride that I think that you guys should have in the fact that you are part of the history of such an iconic game. That
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's I mean, it's cool. I mean, and as a player, I mean, you're a rampant player yourself, still to this day, correct?
Yeah.
And like, I mean, it's got to be cool to like know that you can't really play a good like multicolored deck without using some of your cards. I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, it's fun. It's always weird. I mean, I play with the Commander group now that was local, because I put on Twitter, like, is there anybody around here that even plays Commander where I live? Because I'm going nuts. And that was a few years ago already. So I arrived at the Commander group, which is just at someone's house. It's very laid back. These are all really, really nice people, and you say hello, you introduce yourself, and then a bunch go like, yeah, I was at your booth at X or Y GP to have my card signed. I was like, that's very, very strange to me, right? Because we're not in that setting right now. We're just, I'm a new person. You've kindly invited me into your home to play some Magic, and I mean, we're friends now, but it's kind of surreal. It's really weird.
Yeah, you were the star. Like they're like, this is tonight's special guest.
Yeah, thank God that is no longer the case. Thank God it's just some friends hanging out and playing some Magic.
Oh yeah, but I'd have to I have to be I have some famous friends, and I'd love to just be like, you're so famous. Oh my gosh. And they're not amused, but I think it's funny.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh my gosh. No. So, speaking of commander, what is your current commander? What is the current commander you are playing with?
Ooh, well, there I have different decks based on how I feel. So none of them are very competitive because I'm not a super competitive player. I built a Chromium deck because I like the artwork. It doesn't work. It's terrible. I wouldn't recommend Chromium for a commander. It's really hard to get like good stuff out of it. And then when I'm feeling spiteful, I love my Karvak deck, which is just, I mean, maybe that one is a little competitive. I have a Progenita's Best Friends deck because I love bling. So usually what I do is when I go to a GP, I go to the local stores and see if they have fans that want to trade stuff for artist proofs or playmats or whatever I have. It's kind of like a gimmick, right? I'm not trying to rob their of their hard-earned money or income, but if they have a few cards that they want to part with, I'd be happy to like do a little trading deal or do that with some players if they feel like they can get good value. So I've collected a nice amount of planeswalkers and you know just crazy artifacts and stuff. So that's my. I think I want to win a game deck. Um, Elves that are absolutely terrible, and I'm blanking a bit because I took apart my mill deck. Well, I should put it back together now. Niv Mizzet spells.
Oh, that's the one that just pings the hell out of you.
Yeah, love that. I used to have a Jorah artifact, a combo deck that focused only on comboing off with Aetherflux Reservoir, because why not? Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, this is my current favorite. See, I knew I forgot one. That's my current absolute favorite. I love playing this deck.
Is that one of the newest commanders?
Xeris, yeah. It's the legendary Snake Leviathan that whenever an opponent draws a card, except the first one, I create a green 1/1 snake token. So I present this as a group huck deck. Like, look, wheels and all the good stuff. Everybody keeps drawing cards. You know, the Howling Mine. Everybody just keep drawing cards. It's really, really fun. And I just put a bunch of lands down. And then comes the forced fruition. You have to draw cards. And then obviously comes the overrun type of effect. And that's done.
And then everybody's sort of just slack-jawed.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun trying to get 60 or 100 plus tokens out in a turn, right? Where you go like wheel, forced fruition, keep going, and let's go. I don't think it ever worked, but having, you know, doubling season out and parallel lives and go like, I'm going to wheel, that kind of gets people worried. And
yeah,
I just like that. I think that's really funny. It
I
doesn't really do anything, but it's just very funny.
I love the fact that you said that you run Chromium just because of the artwork. Like I'm one of those people.
Oh,
too,
yeah.
where I will build a deck because of lore. I will build a deck because of artwork, and I get sometimes like my play group gets a little frustrated because they're like, "Well, it's not as you're doing this on purpose." I'm like, I can't help it. Like I love the story. I have to do it. It's a compulsion. Would there be? Is there a pet
it's
card?
Fun when there's so many different layers to it.
Right. It's like
the pet card. Yeah, Mox Opal is my pet card. I put that in every deck.
That's your pet card. Well, that's like kind of that's a good pet card. I mean, like I always thought pet card was like something that you put in that was, you know, kind of I shouldn't say it, kind of crappy, but at the same time you'd put it in any
crappy pet card. Okay. Well, let me think, because I mean, yeah, Mox Opal is very, very blingy in its, you know, pet cardiness. I mean, you do have to get the metalcraft for it, so that means every deck I ever have is very artifact oriented. But I'm a sucker for artifacts. Probably a basic land fetcher or something like that, right? So I can annoy people fetching my own lands. While we're talking about Mox Opal, by the way, I can take a picture for you to put up, but I just want to show it on cam. I had Eric Klug do this altar of Mox Opal.
Oh wow, with Christopher,
which I think is just absolutely amazing. It's probably my favorite card that I own. Yeah, it's Saruman with the Palantir. I think it's probably my favorite thing I've got. but it would probably be like Expedition Map or something like that, or Chromatic Lantern, something that has to either do with mana or gets me more mana, because I'm a huge lands guy. Half of the decks I have are just lands, land decks. The Jund Commander one, Lord Windgrace.
That's interesting that you do land decks. Interesting. There's a
I
theme
usually
here.
don't run my own lands. I usually don't run my own lands even in my decks. I'm a huge John Avon fan, and old school Rob Alexander for his Ravnica duels. I love them to bits. I don't know why. I mean, in terms of illustrations, not all of them are perhaps the best illustrations out there, but they do grab me, and I think that's really important when the card or the art or anything, the lore, does something that kind of grabs you, and then you can just kind of run with it.
Yeah, there's the nostalgia factor for you, I bet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's this artist called Craig Mullins, and he's more famous in my other job world, which is concept art, pre-visualization for video games and movies. Before the stuff gets made, there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to get made, and they call it concept art. And he's sort of legendary in there. And he did some lands and a few cards for Magic the Gathering. I think the Mountain from Time Spiral and a Swamp and stuff. So usually when I can, I run that. I have stacks of it that I run. I just like them. That's it.
I mean, I feel like, it's cool. It's also like, it's very humble of you. I mean, like, I guess it kind of would be weird to like have to see so much of your art when playing Magic. You're almost like, that's too much me.
When it's about me, then it kind of takes away from the game. I mean, there's a time and a place. If I go to a convention for it, I'm not going to be upset when people show me, the deck that has all my cards in it. I'm super flattered. It's still one of the weirdest things ever to me, because I worked on really big video games, but nobody cares there that I did stuff for it, right? Because the dynamic is just completely different. And I run my own lands when it's the dual lands or the tri lands and stuff. It's because I've done a couple of good dual lands, so I'm gonna run them if I have them. I'm gonna run them. I mean, but for example, the Polluted Delta, right? I would never. I have a Judge promo Polluted Delta from Rob Alexander, and even though I did a Polluted Delta, I would never run mine because I just like that one a lot more. I think that's really, really, really funny. Maybe my own Spire Garden, because I think that illustration came out super badass. It was one of those, lightning in a bottle kind of illustrations too, where it all clicked. But normally, I try to put other people's artwork in there, also because I like it.
Is there now? I know you can't give away any specific details about stuff, but how do you know of how many pieces you will be working on for upcoming sets? I'd like to know what the number is for the upcoming sets that people are working on.
Well, for me, it's winding down a lot. I think now that I kind of told Wizards I would no longer be interested in doing basic lands. I'm not a creature guy. I'm not a real artifact guy. So my slot is kind of being filled, and I'm okay with that because I've transitioned in a large part to the Dungeons and Dragons team, which is the same company, same floor. Some people that I've worked with for a long time on Wizards or Magic stuff for now at D&D. So I think that's really fun. But they got me to do a couple basic lands. I did a cycle or two.
Is it because you feel like you're pigeonholed, or is it because it's become yeah,
there's very much a pigeonhole. And these days Magic, because of the amount of product that they bring out and because their new company, the company has kind of shifted focus, right? They've shifted away from the old school fantasy illustration vibe that they went for, and now everything needs to be a little bit more streamlined and cohesive, and that makes it easier not only for marketing and also for new people to be onboarded onto the game, but also the game has changed. There's much less interaction with the artist when you play Arena than when you play paper Magic. And I don't think the core group of paper will ever go away, but there is a notable shift in dynamic. So if you take that and then basic lands getting less room for that personal touch and needing, simply because of the demand what the game is becoming, to be a more literal interpretation of what is happening in the style guide, there's just not a lot of room for me to explore new topics. And I think after 60 or 70 lands, a lot has been said, right? It might be a time thing. It might, revisit. A lot of it has to do with me as an artist as well, where I feel like I've been doing this for so many years that I also need a change of pace to figure out long term, what do I want to do, what do I like to paint, and how do I like to paint it? Because if you keep expressing yourself in the same way, you never really grow. And Dungeons and Dragons is way different. They don't need finished stuff. They want concepts. How does this crazy castle or forest or whatever look? So it's a little different. So when there are briefs that do allow me to express myself, and I just finished 2 of them, it becomes a lot of fun. But we kind of move away from saying 5 cards of me or more than 5 cards at some point. It was getting ridiculous in every set, to now probably more like 4 or 5 cards per year. Like I will skip a bunch of sets. And I know I can remember not too long ago, if I would get skipped for a set for whatever reason, I was gutted. I was really, really gutted. I get like annoyed. I get like super cranky. And there's a million reasons why it could happen, right? We went from having 3 art directors in-house to I think now there's like 12. So you can't know everybody anymore. And they kind of have to be that way in order to keep producing at that level that they are, which is just mind-boggling. So I noticed for myself as well that I had a very healthy connection with the game as a player, loving the game, checking out all the new cards. I mean, I was glued to the screen during like spoiler season as much as the next person. But on that professional side, it was getting very unhealthy because a lot of my identity and mental health was directly tied to which cards am I getting and are they any good? So I noticed that, okay, for my own sanity, I need to, and for my own development as an artist, I need to really disconnect. And saying to them that I would no longer do basic lands was really, really hard. It was really difficult. It felt like a really shitty thing to do from a personal side, but professionally speaking, it was the right choice. And winding down, actually, I think my cards have gotten a lot better. I think they've gotten a lot more kind of interesting and have a lot better vibe. So I'd rather now do 2 good cards per year than like 40 kind of man ones. Because I used to be the guy like, Kev Walker did like 480 illustrations, and I want to be the one who does 481, right? And now after having done 150, I'm like, I think it's time for like a break, like a breather, relax a little bit, because it's only been 7 years.
So when you say winding down, you mean I take it as you're just, the production is going to be less intense, and not that you're stepping away from Wizards entirely.
No, I would never. As long as they'll have me, I'd gladly do stuff for them, because there's a certain kind of rush, right? Like a certain kind of high when you see an email pop in going like, "Ooh, art commission here at the top, like we want you." That feels, there's a really huge amount of validation in there, not just because you need money to live, but also because you understand the scope of the game, especially having been part of it since like 2009 and briefly before. So then you go like, man, I get to be part of that history again. I wonder what kind of cool stuff I could do now. But if you dive too deep in that, it becomes, the contrast becomes very, very high. How you look at other artwork, how you look at your own artwork. You work on a piece and you go like, yeah, I think this is good. I'm happy with how this is going. And then, I talk to one of my friends and see their artwork, and I'd be like, throw everything out. I'm going to start over. This is ridiculous. Huh. And the more that you do that, the higher the highs become, but the lower the lows become. And once it starts affecting you for like a 2-3 days where you really can get into a bad kind of funk, that's bad. You got it. That's why I started writing more about mental health and being open about it, because also I try to figure out like, where's this coming from? I knew where it was coming from. I was just in denial, right? I didn't want to blame it on my connection to the game. So it was kind of like working up to, divorcing myself slightly in that sense, and focusing more on how can I positively contribute to, social media, to the game. So yeah, it's been a weird one.
Well, it's again, it's very admirable, and it's also, you know, you should be proud of your work. I mean, and not just from an accomplishment of artistic like accomplishments, but I'm impressed by it from an MTG finance aspect too. Because I go through your stuff and I'm like, he's got to be probably one of the blingiest. Like, you have the blingiest cards like per person, I'd say. Like, there's just, you look at them, you're like, those are some lands. Like, yikes. Like, I mean, even the Phyrexian Swamp's going for $10, which is like a $10 basic, like, swamp.
Yeah. I was a little impressed. I mean, I had the great fortune and somewhat misfortune of being friends with some of the greatest illustrators for the game. I've had the honor of meeting John Avon a couple times and talking to him, and he's so humble about things while his work is so influential. One of my good friends is Tyler Jacobson, and he is so good at what he does. Almost every card he does is this crazy cool legendary creature, and the illustrations all look beautiful, and I'm just like blown away and then torn between loving that I can pick his brain and hating my own artwork for not making the same smart decisions. But I mean, that's how you grow. So yeah, it's it's still kind of being part of that, and having people chase your cards to bling out in favor over other really big names is I don't think anyone could ever properly describe that feeling or get used to it, you know.
It's an astonishing thing. And the final question I like to always ask is there any other projects that you would like to talk about, that you can talk about, that you have upcoming?
Yeah, so one of the upsides of now working a little less on Magic, still my time is filled with D&D most of the time, but there's finally time for one of my own personal projects, which I really like. I think also because it's so different from Magic work, because all my client work is very figurative. You can really tell what it is, but I love working abstract where you can't really tell what it is. So I'm working on a personal project right now, which is called Wizard Immortal. And I won't spoil too much of the story, but it's about a immortal wizard, sci-fi story, who's traversing space looking for death, because
looking for
they have
death.
Yeah, they have transcended. I mean, there's a movement in sci-fi called transhumanism, where you go so far beyond what it means to be human, all the preconceived notions that you have about gender or identity, they're all gone. They don't exist anymore. So you get to the core of what someone is about, right? That's the only thing that matters, which is I guess a kind of utopian way of viewing a person. I think that really appeals to me. But yeah, it's about this wizard who's become immortal, and they've lived for so long that they're kind of done with it, but they can't die. So they've almost acquired every ounce of power that they possibly have, and they're now traversing the depths of space looking for the physical manifestation of death, to have a conversation with them, like how to end this, instead of waiting until the inevitable entropy of the galaxy consumes everything. They're kind of done with that. They want to get out before that, right?
Like they want to have that chess match.
Yeah, they want to have the chess match and also have the conversation, because I guess if you've been alive for that long, you want to meet death just to ask, a couple of questions that have been on your mind for, a few eternities. So
yeah, it's like it's like, you've been around longer than me. Are you depressed too? I mean, are you depressed?
But obviously the topic is so big. It's not about a bearded guy, because we're so far beyond that. So I like that. That's the premise of the story, and I love expressing that in very, very abstract kind of, space stations and colors and all that kind of stuff. Very different from my normal stuff. So yeah, very personal, and I'm excited about it. Finally getting started. So yeah.
And what will it be? Will it be a game, or will it be like what will it be? What will be its final setting?
Fingers crossed it will be a book, depending on how much art I can get out of there. And if not, it will just be a short collection of images with blurbs of text accompanying in whichever form I can get out there. But hopefully a nice little art book.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. It was great talking to you.
Thank you, Aaron. It was good fun.
All right. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too, man.
Bye.
Take care.
Well, that was fun. I know I had fun. And now we're going to go into something even more exciting, the winner of the card of the week. And I'm going to probably screw up both the name of the card and the winner. In fact, I'm going to grab my diary and keep it out in front just in case I forget, which I already have, by the way. Okay, so I remember the winner of this week's card is Reflections of Yetvara. That was a question mark because it's from Kaldheim, so I can't really tell you that. And the winner for this week is Chronico97. So yes, please email me at alpermarkov@gmail.com if you want to get the information so I can get your card mailed. And I would like to remind everybody to please subscribe and comment if you want to be entered to win in any of the videos. And that's all for now. Until next time, I gots to scoop.